Right, thank you so much for staying with us. Time now for her say, and our guest tonight, like I have been saying, is none other than Her Excellency Monica Geingos. She is the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia and a qualified lawyer as well. Before assuming the flown role, that is the First Lady of Namibia, in 2015, she was a core shareholder and managing director of Namibia's largest private equity fund. She served on the boards of large public and private sector companies as either chairperson or deputy chairperson, and did play a meaningful role in the private sector development. Karibu sana, First Lady. We're glad to have you on Her Say tonight.
Thank you very much.
A belated happy birthday to you.
All the peaceful people are born in November.
Oh, okay. I wish I was born in November. I mean, what does this new year look like for you, Flon? Granted, it's been a few days since the 15th, but what does this new year look like for you?
It's busy, but to me it's new seasons. It's more work to be done. There's lots of work to be done. So it looks very much like last year.
Most definitely. And Flon, we're having this conversation tonight, the November 25th, the day we begin commemorating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. But I feel like my personal opinion is we usually have this conversation over and over again each November, every year, and we're going to have this next November. But there's pretty much not much action that is taken against GBV.
GBV, the big drivers of GBV is how we think about ourselves and how we think about women in society. And when you're trying to change mindsets, it takes decades. The mindsets that engender violence take also decades to build. That seed that makes a violent person was planted long ago. So I think we must do it every November for the next 2 decades, if we need to, until we start to see the societal change that's required, because societal change takes time.
Most definitely. And there's something you said last year at the Presidential Summit on GBV and femicide in South Africa, and I quote you, "In theory, we are all against GBV, but in practice, we are not." Why did you say that?
Because it's in our houses, it's in our hearts, it's in the people that we love. And we always have reasons why. And we need to start looking past the reasons and just looking at the actions. And how do we change this? How do we communicate to each other in a way that's not violent? How do we build constructive communication tools? Because we are only against GBV when it's somebody else who's the victim. We're only against GBV when it's the perfect victim. We're not against GBV when there's scenarios that we can say, but why was she there? Why was she wearing that? Why was she drunk? The minute we stop asking those kind of questions and just focus on the action, we've made some progress.
But then again, I want to get personal. Allow me, Your Excellency, because I want to know how you deal with trolls on social media. That is also a form of violence, online violence, Flon. And this is on the back of a video that you released on social media, and where you condemned, where you said enough is enough, you've had enough of these trolls. How did you get there?
I think I just got fed up, but I also got fed up of being told, don't say anything, just keep quiet. And I realized my silence is not protecting me. And if I can give you feedback since that video, it stopped. So sometimes you need to troll your trolls. So you must speak up, you must stand up for yourself. And unfortunately, they'll move on to those who don't stick up for themselves. So we must stick up for each other. We must also speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves for whatever reason.
But then again, on a personal level, as a human being, Your Excellency, did those trolls get to you? Because some of the insults are unprintable, you know. Did it get to you on a personal level?
No, I separate myself, the person, from the position. So I understood all the time, they've developed a caricature of somebody who's in that position, who's not me. So it couldn't get to me. What did start getting to me is I started to realize, if this is happening to me and I'm quiet, and I do actually have a voice and a platform to speak up, what message am I sending to those who don't have voices and platforms? Because they'll say to themselves, but it's happening to Flon as well. Who am I to object to this? And that's really what triggered my speaking to this. And the moment I spoke, everybody was also saying, this is exactly what's happening to me. So it didn't really get to me, but it did get to my loved ones, my children. It did get to people who mattered to me. But it was also getting to young girls, not only in Namibia, but across the continent, where they were saying, but this is how women get treated by society. And I must accept this. And I don't think anybody needs to accept this. And trolls target everybody. Research is showing that online bullying and violence is more targeted at women, and we shouldn't be surprised. That's the same in real life. But men get trolled as well. So it's a behavior that we should all reject. It hurts all of us.
And I actually meant to ask how much more the other women who would pretty much not have a voice like you do, Flon. I want to ask about your experience as First Lady since 2015. It's 8 years now. I mean, how is it like being a First Lady, being the mother of the nation?
It's an incredible privilege. I think sometimes we end up getting sucked in to the liability part of the First Lady balance sheet, but the asset part is quite good. So I'm incredibly privileged and honored to be the First Lady of Namibia. It's something that has forced me to see things I can't unsee. I was very much a private sector person. I ran the biggest private equity fund in the country before I started, and was very vested in the financial sector. But I doubt I'll go back. I think I'll stay in the line of developmental work that I've started to do, because as I said earlier, you can't unsee some of the things that you see.
Most definitely. But then again, I want us to go beyond the president's wife tag, which is actually, I'm using your words, because allow me to quote you, Flon. You said being a First Lady is being married to a politician who is very powerful. But it's not your power, it's his. I have an earned privilege, social capital you have not worked for. You have said this before, and I want us to talk about that. It's just beyond being the president's wife.
So all the titles I've ever had, and it's a number of them I've earned. Being a First Lady is an unearned title. It is social capital. It is unearned privilege. And you must convert it. You must use it. I think the Bible also says that those with privilege must help those who don't.
Given,
and with much privilege comes great responsibility.
That's true.
And I take that seriously. So I use that unearned privilege, that unearned social capital, to help those who I should be helping.
Most definitely, and we shall talk about that. But while we're still here and we're talking about that president's wife tag, just a little about your relationship with President Hagu, First Lady, because you got married on Valentine's Day. I know of the tag Presidential Bay. And there's something else that's really interesting. You were once live on Facebook, and the president commented, "I'm watching you from Namibia," a full stop and husband. I found that to be really sweet.
It's very sweet. And that was one of the things I thought about a lot, is that when we make a decision to get married, as women or as men, whoever you marry has an incredible influence of how the trajectory of your life is going to work. They have their support, or lack of it, has an incredible influence on the type of parent you'll be, on the type of colleague you'll be. And my lesson, and I say this in a gender neutral way, as a woman, you must marry a man who is self-actualized. And self-actualized doesn't mean he must be a president. He could be a pastor, a teacher, a taxi driver, a market person, as long as him or her is happy with what they're doing and they're happy with themselves. Because somebody who hasn't self-actualized, who's not happy with themselves, can never be happy for you or supportive of you.
That's true.
So when you see my husband on Facebook saying, "I'm watching you from Namibia," that's a man who's self-actualized. It's a man who doesn't have low self-esteem problems. It's a man who is at the peak of what he wants to be, and he thinks he's where he needs to be. So it's easier for him. There's space in his mind and in his heart to be supportive.
Let's switch gears now and talk matters gender inequality, First Lady, because Namibia actually has one of the highest levels of women representation in Parliament. I must mention that I have spoken to Patience Masur before, one of the youngest MPs in Namibia. I mean, what did it take to achieve this as a country?
Simple answer, quotas. Our female representation in Parliament doubled overnight because the ruling party took a decision to have what is called a zebra system. And what that meant is that the entire parliamentary system became, it doubled. So our number, I think at the moment, is about 46%. But I see opposition parties are taking the lead as well, not all of them. But we haven't legislated it yet, but it does show the responsibility, the special relationship a ruling party has in guiding the values and ethics of a society away from their role as a governing party.
But still, I feel now beyond Namibia, we have a long way to go, not in Kenya, not in Africa, but beyond, because the United Nations Women recently released a report that said only 25 countries in the world are led by women. Is it that people don't have faith in us as women? What is the problem? And we are the majority, by the way. Why don't we vote for ourselves?
Yeah. I think many countries have a pipeline problem. There are lots of women in the system, but because we came in late into the system, those at the top are generally men. And you'll find this in a system where there wasn't reform. Say, for instance, there was a time there was a particular ethnic or racial group that was at the top of the system. It takes time for those who are at the bottom to come up. And we are deeply entrenched in the pipeline. And there will be a moment where we'll start seeing this momentum. The UN report that you're talking about, I think it talks about 122 years. 122 years is too long. We do have to expedite it. But I think what we must recognize, societal change takes time. And if you try and push it too fast, there is a backlash. In countries like Namibia, where we're seeing 75% graduation rates in tertiary education institutions, we are also seeing an increase in gender-based violence of women who are more educated than their partners. That's backlash. So I'm not saying we must move so slowly that it takes us 122 years, but we must move within the social and economic dynamics of our respective countries. I've got good news for you.
Tell me.
Namibia is a functional democracy. We're going into elections next year.
That's why I wanted us to get to.
But we're very confident that we will have a female president when we're done
next question.
with those
Are
elections.
we going to have a female president in Namibia next year?
Democracy permitting, yes. We are confident that that will be the outcome. But there will be other presidential candidates, mostly men. But we are quite confident that there is a very strong female candidate being put up by the ruling party, and we all have faith in her leadership and confident of a victory for her.
You know, this is her say, we're all about women, so I feel like this is the point where I say, yay, go woman, whoever will be fronted for that presidential seat, First Lady. Let's talk about you now as the president of the Organization of African First Ladies for Development. I mean, what has your experience been like since last year, 2022 June?
WAFLAD, that organization that you talk about, that your First Lady, Mama Ruto, is also a member of, is an incredible organization. And what it does, it leverages the convening power of First Ladies and really extrapolates it to the collective convening power of African First Ladies. It's the biggest and most organized organization of First Ladies. And we've also inspired First Ladies from other regions to do something similar.
Let's talk about the progress made under your tenure, particularly on closing the gender inequality gaps.
So WAFLAD has had the benefit of having incredibly strong leadership since it was organized 20 years ago. So I've really built on an incredible foundation. Right now, that campaign that you're talking about, closing the gender equality gaps, is a campaign that will run for 12 months. It will be launched in every single country. And you would have noticed on the 22nd of November, your First Lady also launched hers as part of her program. That was her Kenya launch. There'll be 20,000, there were 20,000 women at that launch. And this is what's going to happen throughout African countries where there are OAFLAD members. First Ladies will launch in their countries and push the same theme throughout the continent. And we're quite confident at the end of this campaign, we would have reached 600 million African minds and hearts.
So what exactly do you want changed after these 12 months? What tangible change do we expect to see?
So we've got 4 areas that we focused on: economic empowerment, gender-based violence, education, and social development. And we're quite sure that it's not social development, it's health. And we're quite sure that in these 4 thematic areas and within their sub-themes, if we can get right the issues that need to be resolved in those 4 areas, gender equality becomes easier and more, you can feel it in a way that's tangible and not just something that we talk about.
Most definitely. Let's now talk about you as the UNAIDS Special Advocate for Young Women and Adolescent Girls. And I want to start with Namibia, your country, on the progress that you've made against, in this fight against HIV. And let's talk numbers. Let's talk a reduction in the transmission rate from mother to child to 4%. That is impressive.
It's impressive. We one of the 3 African countries that were recently declared to be near epidemic control. We're very close to our 95 targets, so it's not surprising that maternal to child mortality is starting to reduce. It's pure leadership. It's leadership and partnerships. Namibia is in control of the majority of its domestic financing towards our HIV response, with partners like PEPFAR and Global Fund also playing an important role. But the core infrastructure of our HIV response is owned by the government and the people of the country, and that's a big lesson. Another big lesson, and you want to talk about adolescent girls and young women, is that new infections continues to stubbornly be vested in that age group. In Namibia, like in many southern and east African countries, an adolescent girl and a young woman is 2 to 3 times more likely to have HIV than a boy of her age.
That's true. It's actually the same here.
It's similar dynamics, and we all know that the drivers of what's causing this, if they're not getting it from adolescent boys and young men, they're getting it from a generation of men who are older than them. And we must address these issues. We must be open and transparent about what's driving these new infections.
And I like what you say, start free, but stay free of HIV, of course. And the question would be, how do we ensure this happens? Not now in Namibia, but in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Africa as a whole.
I think what you were talking about initially of vertical transmission from mother to child, that's something that we can stop. We've got the tools to stop vertical transmission of HIV from mother to child. So that's starting free. Staying free is making sure that adolescent girls are not exposed to HIV in the times when they're most vulnerable. And we know that sexual violence is a driver. We know that transactional sex is a driver. And really limiting access for that to happen. And that is staying free. So the tools are there to create an HIV generation. And it's really us to leverage the tools that are available, whether it's in Namibia, whether it's in Kenya, whether it's in Uganda, Botswana, Zambia. But I think African governments have shown incredible leadership in this regard. And that's why you're seeing so much movement in East and Southern Africa. But we're a distracted world at the moment. There's a lot of funding going to fund wars while others are trying to save lives. There's we still have the distractions of COVID. So the HIV agenda has a job to get itself back on the global discussion to make sure that all the incredible gains that countries like Kenya have made in the HIV response are not lost in the noise of global discontent.
And Flawn, you are also the MAC More Than a Mother ambassador, and you say women are more than mothers, men are more than fathers. No to infertility stigma.
Yes.
Tell us about it. That's what I want us to talk about. That stigma on fertility issues.
So when I got married, when everybody I know got married, the first question you get asked at your wedding ceremony is, when is the baptism? An assumption that you don't have a challenge. And many people deal with this challenge of infertility. And we must be sensitive. And people are more than mothers. Women are more than mothers. Men are more than fathers. And if they can't have children, she remains a woman. He remains a man.
That's true. And I like that you brought that up, that question that people ask when you get married. And Florn, I don't understand, because again, I'm picking this from you. You said that, people have been asking, is there something happening in State House? And there's something you said in your language which I did not understand. I wish I could say it here. But you have kids of your own. The president has kids of his own. I mean, why can't people just mind their own business?
So what they say, it's in a language called Oshiwambo, which is very close to Swahili, by the way.
What
they say, ko State House or Kuinyenga. Has anything moved at State House? Now imagine, I'm turning 50 soon. My husband is about to retire. I don't think either of us want a baby. The youngest in our family is 24 years old. But people are conditioned to believe that once people are married, a baby must come out of that relationship. And relationships are more than just children. The values that bind a relationship are deeper. The roots that bind the relationship go deeper than childbearing.
But then again, how do we involve the men more in this fertility conversation? And not just that, in the previous topics that we've discussed, matters gender inequality, matters GBV.
Yes.
How do we rope them in this conversation?
I think the reality is that we tend to assume that infertility is on the woman's side. It's 50-50. It's on both sides. So men are also impacted by infertility. Men are more impacted by violence than women. A man in Kenya is more likely to be killed by another man than a woman. Now, when a man has a higher chance, it means a woman will also be killed and exposed to violence. But statistically, men suffer violence more than women. So if there's any gender that should be the most vested in the fight against gender-based violence, it will be men. Because I'll tell you what the trick is to reduce violence. If you reduce overall levels of violence, you reduce gender-based violence. You cannot fight gender-based violence in a vacuum. A man who's willing to beat up another man at a nightclub because he stepped on his shoe will certainly beat up his wife or his girlfriend because she did something to offend him. Because this man has learned that violence is how I communicate my anger. And the moment we unteach that habit in that man, he'll also stop assaulting men wherever he finds them. He'll also not assault women. So men are the biggest beneficiaries in a reduction of societal violence.
I feel like we're going back to the GBV conversation, and just allow me to ask, so what do we do from here? Where do we go next to ensure, could we ever get to a zero rate of GBV?
I think human beings have a violence gene deeply ingrained. If you read the Bible, violence in human beings have always been there. But I do feel we can significantly reduce it. I do feel there's lots of outstanding conversations. And one of those conversations is, how does African masculinity look like in the 21st century? When we talk about gender equality, when we talk about 50-50, what are we talking about? What we're not talking about is 50-50 is not a mathematical calculation. If I cook today, it means my husband must cook tomorrow. If I go home and I say, hey, Hage, it's your turn to cook today, he'll divorce me. But we do have equality, but not on the small stuff, on the big stuff. The big stuff means we see each other as human beings. I recognize my husband's role as the head of house. He recognizes my role as his wife. So he plays his part as the man of the house, but he enables me to also play my part. Now you get scenarios where people want to be recognized as the head of the home, but he doesn't want to act like one. So we need to redefine masculinity in a way that each one carries their title with dignity. Be the man of the home. Do what needs to be done as the man of the home. Be the woman of the home, but also do what needs to be done as the woman of the home. And that is not a societal discussion. That's a negotiation between two people who love and respect each other, and who don't look at what the neighbors are doing and say, the neighbor is cooking spaghetti, you better also cook spaghetti. It means within the confines and the context of your relationship. But it also means let us find unions which are fundamentally underpinned by mutual respect and a recognition of one another's humanity.
And that does sound like the relationship you have with the president.
It does, and it's important for us to model this to our children and to the young people around us. So that's what they look for in their partners. That's what my father was to my mother, and that's what I looked for in a husband. So often we replicate. We must break these generational curses. We replicate what we saw, and often, I don't know if it's the same in Kenya, but Namibia, for instance, and it's liberation war related, we have a fatherlessness problem.
My goodness. First Lady, that's the conversation I had on Sunday, this Sunday, fatherlessness. It's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge.
But if you weren't father, it becomes hard to be a father. So it again replicates itself. And we must break these chains. We must break these cycles. As a mother of a boy, I can tell you with a lot of authority that a woman, there's a point in a boy's socialization where he needs his father. I have a deep voice, but it wasn't deep enough to socialize my 10-year-old son between 10 and 18 years old. He needed a deeper voice. Now, when we talk about redefining African masculinity, we speak about there's too much attention going to the girl child. Do something for the boy child. I can guarantee you a program that focuses on the boy child that is run by women will not be successful. It has to be run by men.
I have one in mind.
So the next time a man asks, what are you doing for the boy child? The question should be, what are you doing for the boy child? It doesn't have to be your son. It could be your neighbor's son. It could be your nephew. But men socialize men. And it must be done constructively. So I think what women should be doing is supporting men to create organizations, to create structures and platforms where male role models help to socialize young adolescent boys and young men in what it means in the 21st century to be a man.
To be a man. How about to be a woman? And I'm asking this because I think in this conversation I have quoted you so many times. But again, I quote you. I was not young to a point where I relied on my husband for money. By the time I was married, I was a multi-millionaire. I had multiple houses that I owned myself before I got married. So if my husband, I think you know what I'm about to say there. But I actually found that to be so inspirational because we are living in a generation where, say, most of us, not most of us, but some women would tend to, for instance, in your case, to say I'm the president's wife and that's it and end it there. But we need to go beyond that. That's what I'm getting from this statement you made.
You have different scenarios, but one of the scenarios where your question becomes very pertinent of how to be a woman is how are you a woman when you are the female breadwinner in a relationship where you earn more or you earn when your partner doesn't? Does it mean when he upsets you, you remind him that he's in your house? This is my car.
I pay the bills.
I paid the bills. These are conversations we must have because we do see those mistakes. So when we speak to the gaps that we see in masculinity, it's not that we're saying there are no gaps in femininity. And again, these are negotiated positions as couples, as people. that we need to take. What does it mean to be a woman who earns more than her husband? What does it mean to be a career woman? What does it mean to be a woman who's not at home because she may be a pilot, she may be a medical doctor? What happens to caregiving roles? What happens to parental roles? These are not easy conversations. And that's why I go back to what I'd initially said, is we must critically look at the roles that we play and make sure that we don't operate too far away from what we know as Africans and as women, because that's when the problems and the misunderstandings come from. And that's also, they say comparisons are the thief of, is the thief of joy. And it is, because now I'm starting to compare in the relationships I see around me. I think let's look for people who we share the same fundamental values with. We have consensus on the stuff that's important between us, and the rest becomes an easier discussion. Many people are single as we speak, and lonely, and it doesn't need to be that way. It is possible to have a functional relationship, either gender, male or female, with a partner who loves and appreciates you. It may not be perfect to the world, but it works. As long as neither party is hurt in this relationship or feels dehumanized, that's a functional relationship. Happiness first.
Right, time now for a short commercial break here on Hase, but don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We come back with this conversation with Her Excellency Monica Geingos, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia. Stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. We carry on with the conversation we've been having with Her Excellency Monica Geingos, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia. I feel like you're drawing me to a speech you made. Was it at the TEDx Windhoek? That's 7 or 9 years ago. And you're talking about power and how power corrupts and how you were head girl in high school and something happened because of that. I mean, how do we use power not to our own advantage, but to indeed do what it was meant to do and not let it get in our heads? And do you want to talk about your experience as head girl?
So I just want to really recognize how well researched you are. Yes, I was a head girl at high school. And power, people seem to think only politicians have power. A police officer has a lot of power.
Oh, yes.
He's got prerogative powers.
Oh,
He
yes.
can arrest you and keep you for 48 hours.
A
because you
security
irritated
guard
him. A
won't let you
security
in.
guard has power. A taxi driver in a moment has power over you.
That's
so
true.
power
That's
dynamics defines every single social interaction. So how we manage these power dynamics is important. And the person with more power is the one who has the bigger responsibility. With more power comes more responsibility.
Oh, yes, that's true.
With
That's
more
true.
privilege
We go back
comes
there.
more responsibility. So what I always try and say to people with any form of power, don't punch down. Don't punch down. If somebody attacks me as a first lady, I have a responsibility not to punch down.
Sure.
Because there is a power dynamic. This is the same with a man. You're arguing with your wife and you assault her because you're more physically powerful. You're punching down. You're not wielding your power in a way that's constructive. A police officer who uses his prerogative powers in a way that is excessive is punching down. Anyone in any situation where there's a power dynamic is. So we all must learn how to wield power and how we act around power.
And First Lady, as we wrap up, there's something I found really interesting in my research, because you have promised to give away all your wealth to charity. Profound.
Namibia is the second most unequal country in the world from an income inequality perspective. And inheritance is one of the drivers of inequality. I cannot, as a public figure, go into a setting where people are living with low income limitations and tell them, go and study, build the right foundational values, and you'll be fine. But I don't believe that for my children. So I feel once my children have good education, they have a foundational values and setup, they should be fine. They should not need to rely.
Are they aware of this? They definitely are. But
They've
do they
been
know
raised,
this?
my son is 29 years old. He's been raised to understand this, and he's very sensitive about this. He also wants to prove himself. He also wants to be his own man.
I like that.
It's how he's defined himself. My daughter as well. All our kids, we're a blended family. All of the kids in our house are very determined to make it on their own. Because any human being, nobody wants a handout. They want help to be able to manage the risks of life. And then like birds, they must be allowed to fly. Politicians, public figures, we tell this to people who are not wealthy. Get education. It's the key to life. Why is this not true for our children? Many people disagree on this with me. I respect that disagreement. That's my view. It's also my assets. So I want to give my assets to charity. I will give my assets to charity. And that's me saying I've got unearned privilege. And I have a responsibility to manage what the Lord gave me, because it's a blessing.
Right.
And if you are blessed and you are reluctant to share that with others, it was a blessing for the collective, not for you. And I know many people do this while they're alive, and that's incredible. And I laud them for that. So I'm not saying those who don't do it are wrong. That's just how I see it.
And what I got was teach me or show me how to fish. Don't give me a fish. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Right. The last one, First Lady, Be Free Youth Campus, because we need to talk about that. And say for your audience here in Kenya who might not really understand what that is, what is it? How many youth have you reached? And what does this mean to you? Because the youth is clearly here at your heart, Your Excellency.
So Be Free has been a movement that we've created in Namibia that has been very much youth-led. And it's provided young people a platform to have difficult conversations, intergenerational conversations. So they'll lead the platform, but They'll have public figures, they'll have presidents, politicians, police officers, pastors, public health practitioners, social workers, psychologists. Everybody gets together to understand issues from the perspective of young people. And where there are needs to link young people to services, we would do that as well. What the Be Free Youth Campus does is take all of those conversations, all of the things that we heard that young people need, what adolescent-friendly integrated services looks like, and we institutionalized it. We put it into a building. So it's a building that has an adolescent-friendly clinic. It has a STEM center that teaches robotics and coding and other 4IR ready skills. It has a training component. It has a very strong mental health component. It's got a life skills school. There's a gym there which teaches defensive training, but also discipline, the values that we speak about. Anti-violence work, we do GBV interventions, adolescents living with HIV, you name it, it's there in one place, integrated services. And that's how we can say, you must translate what you speak about into something that can be seen, and that's what that campus represents. And we're hoping to scale it into other regions in the country, but also different areas on the continent.
Right, and that's what I want us to talk about. What does the future look like for the youth in Africa, and also in your capacity as the president of the First Ladies Organization in Africa?
I think African youth in the next 30 years are not only going to be a factor on the continent, but globally. I think the statistic is something like 1 in every 5 African youth, or 1 in every 3 will be African.
Yeah,
that's a global issue.
That's true.
That's a mega factor. So African youth are going to change the trajectory and be influential players globally and continentally. And it's really our role as Africans to say whether that's going to happen in a good way or a bad way. Because in order for us to take our rightful position, or for our youth to take their rightful position, they need to be capacitated to do that. So I think now is really us needing to think about, how do we capacitate the African youth? How do we enable them to be free of whatever's holding them back? Is it dysfunctional families? Is it substance abuse? Is it untreated trauma? What is it that's holding our youth back? We need to find what that is and remove those bottlenecks. Because with this kind of youth bulge, it's either an asset or a liability.
Sure. And that's a great place to end it, Your Excellency. Thank you. Thank you so much. We do appreciate having you on set tonight on Her Say. We have definitely been having this insightful conversation with the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia, Honorable Monica Kalondo. You know that name
Geingos.
sounds...
It's Geingos. Kalondo is my maiden surname. It's a Bantu surname.
Yes,
so it will sound
because
very
it sounds,
East African.
yes, it does. I told my husband that, you know, your name is Kalondo, and he was like, that sounds like a certain tribe that we know here in Kenya.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it.